But I would caution against going in with your mind already made up. Things will change in residency. When I was in medical school, I was certain I was going to be a surgeon, but things changed. I decided that I didn't want to be a surgeon. Just like when I started internal medicine, I thought I would want to be a cardiologist, and then I decided I didn't want to be, and I wanted to do something else. So, to keep an open mind.
Hey there, and welcome to the IMG Residency Match podcast. You're in the right place if you're an ambitious international medical graduate who wants insider strategies and inspiration to help you match into residency. I'm your host, Shauna K. Lester. I've been an admission consultant and writing coach for 12 years, and for the last 7 years, I've helped IMGs create residency applications that help them get multiple interviews, match, and create the medical career they want. Dr. Jovan Gayle is an ambitious international medical graduate who entered residency training at the University of Central Florida, thinking that he would go on to subspecialize in cardiology. But by the time it was time to apply to fellowship training, he had developed a new interest and looked elsewhere. Whatever you subspecialize in can determine your job satisfaction, your income, where you're able to live, who you're able to serve, how much time you have for your family, and your general lifestyle for years to come. So Dr. Gayle is going to get into the nitty-gritty of how you can make this big decision. Stay tuned. But we also get into a lot more, including why he decided to pursue residency training in the United States, his advice for approaching step 1 because he did his exams while working and keeping a robust gym schedule. We also talk about the most surprising part of residency training, the research experiences he's been able to have during residency, and how residency really gifted him clarity and something else that is very, very important. You'll hear this. We, of course, also talk about the subspecialty that he chose and his big life goal. It is very big, especially if you're from the Caribbean. You'll be able to identify with how big it is. So enjoy this episode. And I wanted to start off by having a conversation about your earliest memories of medicine.
Earliest memories of medicine. Earliest memories of medicine. So that would have been probably medical school. We had first day orientation. They made us do these silly skits which involved us acting like doctors in different scenarios, which is kind of a good icebreaker thing to do. But that probably was the first time that I ended up thinking about what a doctor actually does and what it would be like to be a doctor. This is after getting into medical school. Yeah, after getting into medical school and starting. And this is the first time I actually sat down and thought about it. Which, I don't know, I guess I took it for granted that I would always end up in medicine and that, but I never actually thought about it. But yeah, so that was it. That was the first time I sat and thought about it. And then I did what I thought a doctor would do. And then that turned out to be exactly what the doctor does most of the time anyway. So that's probably my first memory. That's non-clinical. That's more like, I don't know, philosophical or something like that.
Okay, that's hilarious. I'm actually struggling to believe that story. So there was no shadowing. There were no parents who were doctors. It was literally like you just thought you would go to med school. You went there and kind of skipped.
That's it. Yeah, there was no shadowing. There were no doctors in my family. I never shadowed a doctor before. I went to high school. I did sciences. I went to college. I did chemistry. And I was like, well, it's time to go to medical school now. And then I was in medical school. And then I thought about, actually becoming a doctor and what that would entail. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. So when you started thinking about what it would entail, what were some of the first characteristics that came up for you?
Well, being able to the first thing that came up was being able to interact with people, because it's a fake patient who is my classmate, but now I have to interact with this person and engage this person and get them to tell me about things that, like describe the details of their cough or whatever it was that we were pretending to do at that point. So that was the first thing that struck me about thinking about being a doctor. That was different from what I was already doing, because I was in school for my whole life. So I was studying already. So that was, so this was the first thing I was like, wow, this is different. This is what medicine is going to be like. I'm going to be doing medicine.
Where did you go to medical school, and what was that experience like?
I went to school in Jamaica. It was pretty wild. I mean, I had a lot of fun. Wild is probably not the word. Or maybe it is. But it was a lot of fun. It was very clinically focused, very old school, as they would describe. Really learned a lot, made a lot of great friends that I still keep. That obviously, I'm still in touch with to this day. Yeah, spent some time studying, spent some time having fun. It was fantastic.
All right. And so when it came time for residency training, did you ever think of training locally, or you were very sure that you wanted to pursue residency training in the U.S.?
Well, it was kind of fortuitous. I had actually thought about pursuing training locally. I was weighing both options. One, that, going locally would be easier. I was already used to the system. But then going international, there were things that were available that were just not available locally. So, that's why I decided to kind of pursue training outside.
So when you decide to pursue residency as an IMG, but not somebody from an offshore school, it can be a very competitive process just in terms of the odds that you're going to face and kind of figuring it all out. So what would you say the first 3 steps in the process for you were?
So mentally, the first step, I think, was getting used to the idea that statistically speaking, failure was probably like a 40 to 50% probability. I had looked at the matrix before. So before I took step 1 or anything else, I looked at it and it was 50% failure. And I was like, and I thought, well, am I prepared to fail half the time? And I was like, absolutely. For me, this is regular life anyway. This is regular life. I'm always ready to put effort into something and then not have it work out. If it doesn't work out, that's fine as long as I tried. So
that's deep, Jovan.
Sure. So I'm ready. And then that actually came in useful every step along the way, because when you start out, when I started out, it was essentially very discouraging getting these low scores on the mock tests. But part of it was just do baby steps and get through it, and then keep going. If you fail, you fail. You try something else. If not, then great. So that's what that was the first thing, getting in the right frame of mind. The second thing was actually taking practical steps towards it. Things like, am I going to take step 2 first? Because I was in a very clinically focused medical school and I was actually working at the time. Or am I going to take step 1 first? Because, 1 comes before 2. So simple reasoning, right?
Right.
What am I going to do? When am I going to take the exam? Am I going to take time to study? Am I going to work while I study? Because, it's not just that you have to pay for the resources like the question bank. You have to pay for, the trips to the interview sites later down. So that was the second part, kind of ironing out the practical steps. And the third part was just getting into a routine where I was just working and studying all the time. And for me, I was working and I was studying and I was doing my other stuff, like going to the gym and all this other stuff I usually do. I never said I'm going to take 6 months and just study. I kind of had everything integrated. And for me, I could just wake up and repeat the cycle. So it became kind of the routine of it kind of helped me get it done. So that was my three steps to getting everything all done.
Do you find, or did any of your friends tease you that you were doing that because you have some sort of exceptional ability? Do you think most people can pull that off, to stay in the job and to keep studying and going to the gym?
So I would think, I wouldn't see why anyone else wouldn't be able to do that. But I have had people say that I am exceptional in some way or the other, which I don't necessarily believe.
And was any part of your process done with friends? I'm always curious about sort of social support and people cheering each other on through the exams and the whole process.
Yes, I got through step 1 and step 2. I was pretty much by myself studying on my own. For step 3, I got some friends involved because that was more, because there's a practical aspect to step 3. But it was mostly just done by myself, studying alone, doing the stuff, getting it done.
Okay. All right. So step one is a big one for a lot of people because my experience with individuals over the years is that sometimes people aren't used to that particular method of testing or just the way the questions are asked, they'll say. And so they find that they'll stumble on step one and then they perform much better later. But, that becomes a red flag in their application. So for the person who's just starting this process, and they're completely new to this kind of testing, what would your advice be for preparing for step one and on deciding when it's time to sit step one?
So my first thing would be to, as early as possible, do some questions, do a couple hundred, get familiar with what the questions are like. This isn't something I recommend to someone studying to get knowledge, but to study for this exam, it really helps. It gets you in the frame of mind of what to look for and what to anticipate on the test. For example, if you trained in like maybe the classical British system, you wouldn't expect these kinds of questions where they would give you a very long clinical vignette, right? And then you would be reading along and you'd be like, okay, I know what this diagnosis is. The question is going to ask me what the diagnosis is or what the treatment is. And then it's actually a 3-level question. So it will ask you, what is the side effect of the treatment for this condition, right? And that's very different and that can throw you off. And that will, if you're not prepared for that style of testing, you will lose time in the exam. You might even answer the question that's in your head and answer it wrong. So you really need to get in the frame of mind to answer these particular questions as quickly as possible. Once you have that and you have a kind of familiarity with it, then you can go and kind of increase your knowledge base. And this is probably the most difficult thing for step one, because a lot of it you probably can't get it through any way other than reading the book and just doing questions over and over again. It's things that you won't use in a lot of your routine clinical life. It's things that you really just have to read. I saw a meme that said the real Krebs, so the Krebs cycle.
The
right?
Krebs.
It said the real Krebs cycle is learn the Krebs cycle and forget the Krebs cycle. And that's the cycle. And that's actually very true. I don't know right now. I don't know what many of the steps in the Krebs cycle. I remember there's probably about eight compounds that change, but I can't remember what they are. And when I was taking step one, I knew all of that. I knew all of it. So, you kind of have to accept that a lot of the things that you're learning right now, it's going to go. So you kind of have to focus your effort into things that will come up on the test and get yourself in the frame of mind to pass the test.
So basically just SWOT as you need to.
Right. Just SWOT as you need to. Do whatever you need to do. Use tricks, use mnemonics, use whatever aid you need. But I think always coming back to focusing on, I'm going to apply this on the test is very important.
And so which medical specialty did you match into?
Pulmonary-Critical Care.
At the residency level?
So I matched into internal medicine.
Okay, great. Right. And what has been the best part of residency training for you?
So the best part of residency training is actually overall, there's a lot of things I enjoy on the day-to-day. There are a lot of interactions I enjoy with my patients and with my peers and colleagues. But I think the most rewarding thing has been like seeing myself grow from somebody who kind of maybe understood what was going on, understood how the world of medicine works, and kind of understood generally what we're trying to do, to getting to a level where I can see, this is how I'm going to make my contribution in this world, and this is what I'm going to be doing. And now I really understand, I more understand like the role that the kind of role I should take, and exactly what I should be doing, not just in terms of specialty, but in terms of what kind of patients I want to see and what kind of contribution I want to make. So that's the most rewarding thing. And then seeing myself get the abilities to do so. There's things I know now one can do now that I couldn't do when I started, because that's the whole point of residency. But now I kind of have a much clearer vision of like what it's going to be like. Going back to, remember at the start we spoke about I first member of medical school. I kind of have a very clear vision of what a doctor is like, or the kind of doctor I want to be. So that is really the most rewarding thing about getting into residency.
Oh, okay. I love that. So kind of like clarity and purpose.
Right. Exactly. Clarity and purpose. Yeah, those are
Okay.
two good words to summarize it.
And so when you think of that role and what you want it to be, what does it look like? I mean, you brought up your subspecialty training, what that's going to be. So when you think of your future role, what does that look like?
So that's a good question. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And, there are a lot of people who train in Jamaica and other places in the Caribbean who end up who study overseas because a lot of the techniques that we want to learn, the things we want to be able to do, are not available because of resource limitations or other things like that. So lifetime goal, and you have to kind of set lofty goals. And just like with step one, you set the goal, you're prepared to fail half the time because that's just how things are. But would be to kind of develop myself, technically, intellectually, and as a professional, to be able to leverage my knowledge, experience, and my contacts. Contacts meaning people like me who train in the Caribbean who are here now into a much improved medical system in Jamaica and the Caribbean. So, I mean, that does sound kind of lofty, but
if you had to pick lofty, you definitely hit on it.
Right. It does sound kind of lofty, but if you sitting and thinking about it in terms of the individual steps, breaking it down into the baby steps, it's actually very possible. There's no reason why it can't happen. And for example, and also even working in the US, there's a lot there is substantially more resources, but there's also places in the US that are underserved where resources could be better managed. So there are a lot of lessons to learn, and there are a lot of that stuff that can be transposed to other places. And really, there's almost no boundary on learning, and there's almost no boundary on applying that knowledge. So that's an exciting prospect. So that would be my ultimate goal. But that is also kind of symbolic of just the kind of doctor I want to be. Not really like becoming great for the sake of, and not just becoming a great doctor for the sake of becoming a great doctor, but for the sake of kind of just improving lives, improving the systems, and making everybody less miserable. So that's really, that's really how I kind of frame everything in my mind.
Could you go ahead and explain for people who are not familiar with it, the concept of an underserved population, because you said it in passing?
Oh, I see. So the concept of an underserved population, it can look different in different places. For example, if you're in a more resource-avid place like the U.S., and I mean the U.S. is not homogenous, right? Clearly, there are some places with less resources than others. So that may be uninsured or underinsured persons who you need them to get this medication, but they can't afford it because insurance doesn't cover it, or they simply can't pay for it. So it may look like that, or it may look like in a completely separate country where you have somebody who has a stroke, for example, but you can't get the imaging necessary to confirm the diagnosis because you have one CT scanner, and that CT scanner is being used for a surgical emergency. It can look like either of them. Obviously, the latter example is probably a bit more dire, because even in underserved areas in the US, people generally have more access to emergency services. But in other places, other countries, they're just not there. They're just not there. And I don't think there's a way around it other than finding some way to get that technology available there and to get people trained to use that technology there.
And so basically people don't have access to the care that they need in some form or the other.
Right, exactly. And so to even give a more specific example of how you could solve this kind of problem, I recall when I was working prior to starting residency, something like getting an X-ray would be a pretty difficult thing to get done. You'd have to take the patient and move them up to up 3 floors, and at one point the elevator wasn't working, and it was just it was difficult. It was challenging just from a logistical sense. And working in residency, that would never happen. It's a portable X-ray, and you can get it done almost as immediately as you ask for it. But now, for example, there is a huge boom in point of care ultrasound, and a lot of the conditions you needed an X-ray to diagnose, you can now diagnose with an ultrasound, provided you have the skill. And an ultrasound is something that is fairly cheap, something that you can learn to use. And really all you need is people with the skills to be able to use it. And people in places like Jamaica have a lot of skills, very passionate about learning, very skilled, and just generally, extremely impressive people. But often we're held back.
Total objectivity here.
Sorry. So we're often held back by the lack of resources. But finding a different way like this could solve quite a few of our problems. So, these are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about in general when I'm doing
when you're doing your thoughts, when you're thinking your thoughts.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, I'm glad you brought up the staffing, because I think that's a whole other dimension of it as well, with people being underserved and the geography, if they're rural or so on. So
right.
I love your lofty goals, but I think also all of that HR stuff of the staffing and the reasons people migrate, it's a nice challenge to spend your life working on. So
it is. So it's a huge thing. And I fully understand. I understand why people would migrate and go to different areas. But there's also reasons to go back. So there's that as well.
Okay, absolutely. And has any part of residency training been shocking to you? I know we have to keep this one PG and
PG. Has it been shocking? No, there's nothing. I mean, honestly, no, I haven't been shocked. There is nothing that has been, I've been thought, wow, this is wild. I don't know what's going on here. No, it hasn't. There have been, small surprises. I guess I've been a little bit surprised by, how supportive everyone is. I get the idea that people really support each other, really look out for each other's interests, and really have each other's backs. But I was surprised at the at the level to which that would go. I've had people really go out a limb for me, and in turn I have gone out on a limb for people. So that's been actually very, very, I wouldn't describe it as shocking, but that is something that I was a little bit surprised by.
Okay. In like a refreshing way.
Yeah, in like a refreshing way. Right. Exactly. Okay. Very refreshing. You're good with finding the right words to describe what I'm saying.
It's what I do all day, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. So have you had a chance to do any research?
Yes, I have had a chance to do research.
And in what?
Unfortunately, I haven't been able to participate in any randomized controlled trials.
Okay.
Because that's kind of the ultimate thing. But obviously, those are very rare opportunities. But I have participated in.
You have to explain the importance of the RCT to this.
The RCTs. So the RCTs are basically the second highest level of evidence, just below the meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is like a conglomerate of, basically the analysis of an accumulation of randomized controlled trials, but it's like it's very, very, so they usually generate high quality evidence.
In English, you can trust it.
Yeah, exactly. In English, you can trust it. If you really want to know if something works, do a randomized controlled trial and you'll get an answer at least some of the time.
So you haven't done any of those? I
haven't done any of those. However, what I have done is I participated in some retrospective studies. Now, what I think that means is basically I have, we've submitted a proposal where we are planning to review records and basically find factors that were responsible for a good outcome or a bad outcome in a particular population of patients. That's a planned study. I actually haven't done that yet, but I plan to do that before I finish residency. And it will get done if we're lucky. I've also done multiple case reports. That is where we have presented the details of interesting cases and discussed them and kind of suggested what this may mean for management of this condition or other conditions. I've done quite a few of those. I've also presented cases at conferences. So yeah, I have definitely been able to do some research.
Okay, good. Do you see research being a big part of your future? Because for people who might not be aware, for individuals who aren't coming from offshore med schools, at times they might not have all the opportunities in the world to do research. So it can be sort of a new thing. So do you see your future having more of it now?
Yes, I think so. I think you have to, in this world that we're heading into, the knowledge is growing so fast that you have to be able to keep up with it just to be effective. Meaning there are things that you would learn and that you would do, and then there would be a randomized control trial that would be published, and then your whole practice would change. Okay. You have to be able to keep up with it. And really the only way you can keep up with it, I think, is to participate in some extent. For example, if you are doing something as simple as easy, low level, as presenting a couple of cases at a conference, you go to the conference and then you will go to lectures where they will discuss this new research, and you will get updated. You'll talk to the people, and it will be in your circle. If you don't do any research at all, even if it's low level, and you stay away, then you miss that, and it's hard for you to kind of catch up without being involved. So I think you have to be involved at some level. Now, my focus, I think, is going to be particularly clinical and less research, but I do think that I will be participating in research in some capacity.
And so now that you're moving on from residency, it already leaked, but you can tell us what you're going to be doing and why you chose that subspecialty.
So I'm going to be doing pulmonary critical care. I chose that subspecialty because it's, it's fast-paced. I like fast-paced. The effect is immediate. When you see people, they are very, very sick. And if everything goes the way it should, then in a few hours or a few days, they are not that sick anymore, and the effect is really tangible. So that was something that I found very, very rewarding personally. And also a lot of the techniques and the skills a lot of the techniques were very interesting to learn, and a lot of the skills are very interesting to work on. I haven't done many of these yet, clearly because the training hasn't started yet, but things like, bronchoscopy, intubation, tube thoracostomy or chest tube placement, other things like that. And then it requires you to be very, very fast in terms of thinking. So being able to get a whole lot of data, analyzing it, and then making a nice move within a matter of minutes or seconds is something that I find really enjoyable. So that's kind of why I wanted to pursue it.
Mm-hmm, great. But you had come into residency liking cardiology or thinking that you'd go in that direction. Why?
Yes.
Changed?
Yes, I did. I came into residency liking cardiology. I always come in, I like cardiology, but I came in with an open mind. I was ready to change because sometimes you have to change. Like I said, as a general rule, 50% of the time it might not work. So,
Right.
So I came in ready to change, and I made the decision about a few months before the applications were actually due. Before they opened, really, before the call for applications was made, I made it, and it really there was a lot of I think because I had a lot of exposure to critical care, pulmonary, and I had a lot of exposure to cardiology, and I just ended up liking critical care pulmonary more. So I thought, well, it's clear. Let's just go all in for pulmonary critical care.
And how would you advise an IMG coming into their first year of residency to remain open to options, and I guess to be aware of what all of their options are for further training if they want to do that?
Well, the first step is just to try to keep in contact with the people you already know who are in residency, because they will kind of tell you, what specialties, the ups and downs of, the pros and cons of which specialty, what attributes they think you would need to be good in this specialty, and what specialty they think may be right for you if you would be right for a specialty. If a specialty is the way you choose to go. So that's one. The other thing is paying attention to, talking to the people in your program who are ahead of you. Invariably, there will be people who are matching into specialties. So you can look at these people, see how they function, see what they do, see what their interests are, and then kind of use that to guide you. I've had people who were ahead of me who I kind of use as a benchmark. I said, well, he does things this way. I also do things this way. I can see where his skills are, or his positive attributes are coming out. Therefore, I think the specialty would also make the best use of my positive attributes. So that's one. But I would caution against going in with your mind already made up. Things will change in residency. When I was in medical school, I was certain I was going to be a surgeon, but things changed. I decided that I didn't want to be a surgeon. Just like when I started internal medicine, I thought I would want to be a cardiologist, and then I decided I didn't want to be, and I wanted to do something else. So, to keep an open mind. Okay,
great. And outside of residency, how do you keep alive? What do you do for fun?
Lots of physical activity. So I'm playing football or soccer for
the thing you're not good at.
Yeah, the thing I'm not good at. So I'm playing football or soccer a couple of times a week. I'm jogging or I'm going to the gym. So I stay very, very active. It kind of balances out all the hard work that I'm putting in on the day to day. So that's really what I've been doing. And keeping in touch with friends, family, of course, also helps a lot.
And I think that leads very naturally into a question about what makes all the hard work worth it.
That's a fantastic question. It's a good question because sometimes I'm not entirely sure. I don't think I know. I guess I work hard because for me, hard is the only way to work. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, there's really no other way to do it. Like, so for example, when I did my traditional rotating internship, right? I think it was pediatrics, and I thought, wow, this is going to go well. I don't like children. Children don't like me. This is going to be a mess. I just need to hold my breath for 3 months and get through it. And that really doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. So I decided, well, I'm just going to just put everything into this. And as soon as I started doing that, things just changed. So since then, I have been putting everything into.
Since then, children have liked you.
No, children still don't like me. Don't get me wrong. Children still don't like me. But
right.
But at the very least, whenever I have some kind of challenge or I'm in some kind of position that I don't like, I think my response is like, try to work harder, because it's kind of helped in the past. And if at the very least, if the situation doesn't get better, you're distracted by how hard you're working. So.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So for you, the hard work is its own reward.
It's a coping mechanism. Exactly. You just do it because you got to do it. So to what makes it all worth it? I don't know. Like we said, 50% of the time, you're probably not going to get what you want, because life is like that. It doesn't go the way you want a lot of the time. But I think the important thing is not feeling regret once you tried and it didn't work out, because sometimes it just doesn't work out.
That is true.
Yeah. So what makes it all worth it? I'm not sure. Maybe I'll figure it out one day, and then maybe in a couple of years when you're doing our approaching the end of fellowship podcast or another season, I would have figured it out by then, and then I will come back and let you know.
I know at the end of residency, you have clarity and purpose.
Right.
At the end of fellowship, it will be the reason for hard work.
Exactly. So, goals.
Hashtag goals.
Hashtag goals.
All right, Jovan. So I'm going to ask you 60 seconds of fun questions. The goal is to not think too hard, but to just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Sure.
All right, Jovan. So on a Friday night, podcast binge or movie binge?
Movie binge.
Running or mixed martial arts?
Mixed martial arts.
Jiu-jitsu or running?
Jiu-jitsu.
Shoes or sandals?
Shoes.
Clinical care or research?
Clinical care.
Jazz or rap?
Rap.
Kendrick or Lupe?
Lupe.
For vacation, Europe or the Caribbean?
The Caribbean.
For vacation, Jamaica or Costa Rica?
Jamaica.
Summer or fall?
Summer.
Fall or winter?
Fall.
Who, dead or alive, would you want to meet?
Nelson Mandela.
What would you ask them?
I'd be like, man, 26 years is a long time. How did you get through this? And I want you to tell me the real story, not the story you told to the press.
Okay. Last book you read?
The Stranger, Albert Camus.
Favorite song?
Lupe Fiasco Superstar.
And last picture in your phone?
Last picture in my phone? Wait, the last picture I took? Or?
Yes.
Oh, I took a picture of... It was a document. I was photographing a document.
Okay.
Actually quite boring, but yeah.
All right. Thank you. That goes fast. Okay. So my final question in closing, and you've actually kind of answered this throughout, but what do you want your overall legacy in medicine to be?
Just like, so it goes back to what we discussed. That would be my overall legacy. Bringing medicine to underserved areas, really giving form to the idea that where you're born, what resources you have, which treaties the country that you were born with has signed with other treaties, and your access to travel really shouldn't determine the kind of medical care that you get. So that's really that will really be the ultimate thing. Many ways to do that: make it cheaper, physically go there and do it, or get other people to go there and do it. Many ways to do it, but we'll see which one of them works.
Okay, that's a perfect ending. Thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for tuning in to the IMG Residency Match podcast. To learn more about how you can match into your dream residency, even if right now you don't know where to start, go watch a free training brought to you by the IMG Residency Match Application Accelerator at imgresidencymatch.com. By the end of the training, you'll know how to create an application that communicates to programs why they need to invite you to interview and rank you highly so you can match. Now, don't forget to share this podcast with at least one colleague you know applying to the match so you can celebrate together on match day. And be sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And now we close with a word of inspiration from me, your host, Shauna Kay. If you're not hearing no several times a year, life-changing opportunities are passing you by simply because you're living in your comfort zone.